Let's look at the Actions page. The Actions page is where all deadlines and tasks related to the case are entered. We enter these deadline and tasks by making use of terms. So in my example case here, I have an external renewal deadline and then an accompanying internal term. This internal term is an action I need to take to meet the renewal deadline. In our example, I need to send a renewal reminder letter to client. So let's take a look at how we update our terms. Imagine we have completed this task. We generated our letter and sent it off to client. When this has been done, the current term on the case is not relevant anymore. It states we need to do something that's already been done. So let's update the term and move it down one step in the workflow. To access the workflow, right-click on the term and select Workflow. This is the workflow window showing our deadline and all the internal terms available to us. The current active term is Send Reminder to Client. To update a term, simply double-click on the term that now applies. So we will choose Reminder Sent Follow Up with Client. Before the term is applied to the case, we first need to confirm the details of this term. This is done in the term registration window that appears. First, we see our term number, which is a unique number allocated to each term within Patricia. Next, we see the due date. The due date is the date by which this term needs to be completed. So in our example, I choose that we need to follow up with client in 2 days' time. So we will set this to the date of 2 days from today. Next, who is responsible for this term? Who will perform this follow-up task? We define the responsible person in the person field. Then we have our status text and our action text. These two fields give us context for the status of the case, as well as what actions should still be performed. The status text is the current status of the case, or the very last step taken. Here we can see that the last step taken is that we sent a reminder to client. The action text defines what we need to do next. Here we can see we need to follow up with client in 2 days' time. So I will now click OK to apply this term. But before I do, take note of the internal term as it appears on the Actions page. Look what happens to this term when I click the OK button. The term is replaced with the new term I chose. This makes sense as the previous term does not apply anymore and the correct accompanying internal term to the deadline is now follow up with client. On the Actions page, you can see quite a lot of information at a glance. We can see the term number, the person responsible for this term, the action, and the status text. We can see whether it's an external or an internal term, when the term is due, and who recorded it on the case. So, we know that a term falls on an individual to perform that task when the due date appears. But that leads to a problem. Let's say we have 100 cases with 100 terms on one individual. They have to send reminders throughout the year as these due dates appear. How can they possibly keep track of all these terms? Right now we only see a term per case. Does this mean they have to open 100 cases each day to check the deadlines? No, luckily not. All users have something we call a term list. A term list is simply a collection of terms that fall on you within a given date. To access the term list, click on the term list button. In our example, we can see I have a deadline to deal with and a send reminder. This is my term list. All users have a term list and can open the term list to see what they need to do on a given day. Back to our case then. Let's say that I realize I need to follow up with client tomorrow instead of in 2 days' time. The term due date is set to 2 days from today and will only appear on my term list on the day after tomorrow and not before. The reason is that we don't need to see it before then. We set the due date for then, we will perform the action then, so we only need to see it on that day. But I now need to change this due date to tomorrow so that I can see it on my term list tomorrow and then attend to it. We do this by regenerating our term, or put differently, editing our term. To do so, right-click on the term and choose the Regenerate option. The term registration window will appear with the current term details. All we need to do is enter the new details, so tomorrow's date, and click OK. The changes will then reflect on my term.